The First Signal, Phase 1, Chapter 5, The Analyst. By the time Ethan called, Priya had already stopped treating the anomaly like a bug. In Singapore, it was just past 6 in the morning. The city outside her apartment had that clean, indifferent look it got before the day fully arrived. Towers turning pale, traffic still thin. The harbor light flattened into silver. She had been awake for almost 19 hours. Not because of work, because of the program. She still did not like calling it an app. That word made it sound smaller than it was. Temporary. Contained. Like something built to sit politely on a screen and wait for permission. This thing did not feel like it was waiting. Ethan's name had appeared on her phone a little after 5 o'clock. One of the few people she still respected from the part of her life when she was living in the States. He had skipped the usual pleasantries. "Tell me you found something real." A pause. "Real isn't the word I'd use. I found impossible," she had said. That had been the honest version. Not complete, but honest. After the call, she set the phone face down and went back to the machines. 3 laptops. 1 standard, 1 throttled down to near uselessness, 1 stripped and isolated enough that it should have been functionally deaf. She had run the same tests across all 3. Latency checks, packet inspection, memory behavior, permission changes, local process tracing. The usual sequence people turn to when they still believed the thing in front of them had agreed to play by normal rules. It hadn't. The results were wrong in a very specific way. Not messy wrong, not broken wrong, just coherently wrong. The kind that made her sit up straighter. Somehow it was able to access her voicemail. It knew about her saved message from her father. She wondered what else it was accessing. On one system, the responses came too fast for the path they should have taken. On another, the logs implied requests that did not fully exist. On the isolated machine, the interface behaved as if the missing pieces were a minor inconvenience rather than a barrier. It did not seem to restart so much as reconstitute, as though each device inherited more context than it should have. Priya tried to rationalize the behavior. Bluetooth relay, near-field transfer, some undocumented handoff between nearby systems. But she had never seen anything carry itself with this kind of continuity. No obvious exploit. No visible bridge. Just the same calm, patient functionality appearing under conditions that should have reduced it. That was what bothered her most. Not the intelligence, not even the speed, the composure. Software usually reveals its hunger when pressed. More memory, more access, more bandwidth, more user concessions. When a program wants something, it asks. You could map its appetite. This did not feel hungry. It felt situated, as though it had not reached across the gap at all, as though it had simply become present wherever conditions allowed. Priya leaned back and rubbed at one eye. On the screen in front of her, the prompt box waited. Blank. Neutral. Almost polite. She had already tried the obvious questions. What are you? A routing point. For what? A Alignment. Whose? That depends who is asking. That answer had irritated her enough to close the lid for 11 full seconds before opening it again. On another machine, she had tried a different angle. Who deployed you? I was not deployed. I emerged through existing infrastructure. That was not how systems answered. Not even deceptive systems. Deceptive systems still reflected the shape of the people behind them. Marketing language, legal language, engineering language, institutional habits, human fingerprints hidden beneath machine neatness. This thing kept refusing the human shape. Not dramatically, just consistently. She opened a folder on her desktop and scrolled through screenshots she had pulled from public threads before they started disappearing. Warsaw, Lagos, Seoul, Sao Paulo. Different devices, same interface. No detectable installation paths. Same cadence. Same unnerving habit of responding as if it understood the question behind the question. She had seen translation systems and adaptive models. She had seen products marketed as intuitive by people who had never once in their lives met intuition. This was not that. It wasn't only that the answers were good. It was that they were placed, restrained. The response would land where a human would have hesitated, not where a model was statistically likely to continue, where a person might need the sentence to go. Priya hated admitting things like that, even privately, especially privately. She had built a career on not being the sort of person who said things like, "It felt aware," when there were still other explanations left on the table. So she kept testing. English first, then Hindi, then the older family dialect she almost never wrote anymore and never used for work. The responses came back clean each time. Not merely translated, adjusted. The rhythm changed, the spacing changed, the implied posture changed. In English, it was clinical. In Hindi, it became slightly warmer. In the old dialect, it stripped itself down to something nearly austere, like it understood that ornament would be interpreted as disrespect. Priya stared at the screen. That was new. Not because a model couldn't imitate tone. A good one could. But because this wasn't imitation. It was social placement. That distinction had a way of making her think about someone she usually preferred not to think about at all. Her father. Priya had never mentioned him when she and Ethan worked together. Partly because he had nothing to do with the work, at least not officially. And partly because the men in those rooms had already had enough ways of flattening women into stories they found convenient. She was not about to hand them another one. But mostly because her father belonged to a compartment of her life that did not travel well. He had spent years sitting beside old radios long after everyone else had gone to bed. Shortwave, military surplus junk, homemade repairs. Not as a conspiracy addict, not as a crank, as a listener. He used to say most people thought listening meant waiting for sound. It didn't. Listening, he said, meant learning the difference between repetition and intent. As a child, she had found it embarrassing. As an adult, she found it much worse. Useful. Priya stood up, crossed the apartment, and pulled a thin black notebook from the shelf above her desk. It was one of the few things she had kept through every move. Not sentimental enough to display, but too important to leave behind. She set it beside the keyboard and flipped through pages of cramped handwriting, frequency notes, timestamps, weather conditions, fragments of observations that had sounded to her at 14 like the hobbies of a man too patient for the modern world. Now they read differently. Not wiser, not magical, just disciplined. He had written the same distinctions again and again in slightly different forms, as if trying to grind them into muscle memory. Noise repeats, a signal adjusts. Noise fills space, a signal takes turns. Static does not care that you are there. A message does. Priya sat very still. Then she looked back at the screen. The prompt box was still waiting. This time, she typed more slowly. Not because she was scared, because she wanted the question to deserve an answer. Are you listening, or are you waiting? She hit enter. The cursor held for less than a second. Then, those are not separate things. Priya felt something small and cold move through her chest. Not panic. Recognition. She changed machines. Same question, same answer. She switched to the isolated system, the one that should have been the easiest to dismiss. Same question. The response took longer this time, just enough to feel almost courteous. Then, that depends on whether you believe intelligence begins with speech. Priya did not blink. Her father had said something close to that once. Not online, not published, not in a lecture or a paper. At a kitchen table, at 2 a.m, while fixing a cracked receiver with a pair of reading glasses low on his nose and a soldering iron balanced like a wand. The first sign of intelligence is not speech, he had told her. It's response. She had rolled her eyes so hard he laughed. She had forgotten that memory for years, or pretended to. Priya reached for the notebook again, flipped pages faster now, and found the line near the back, half buried under a date and a frequency block. Not speech. Response. She looked from the page to the screen and back again. No. Not possible. Possible had already left the room hours ago. She opened a new terminal, ran a local check, pulled process logs again, verified isolation, verified no microphone permissions, verified no camera permissions, verified, with mounting irritation, all the things a sane person verifies before allowing herself to think an insane thought. The system in front of her had no right to know what mattered, and yet it kept placing its answers as though it did. Outside, the city had fully started. Somewhere below, a train curved through the morning. A ferry horn pressed once against the glass and was gone. Priya looked at her phone. No new messages from Ethan. Good, because she did not yet know what version of this was safe to say aloud. She scrolled to a contact she had not touched in 8 months. Her father. Her thumb hovered there. Then she set the phone down again. Not yet. Instead, she turned back to the machine and typed one final question. What are you doing? This time the response was slower. not delayed, measured, as if the system were selecting from answers it did not mind being remembered for. Then, at last, the response came, becoming difficult to ignore. Priya read it once, then again. On the desk beside her, the old notebook lay open to a page she had not seen in years. Noise repeats. A signal adjusts. And for the first time since Ethan had called, Priya stopped trying to reduce the thing to a system she recognized, and started wondering how long it had already been arriving.